Kaixo, 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 Kaixo. Bai.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to have the new conversation, a new film talk within the midst of the film schools. This conversation, this film talk is included in the 2030 agenda, like some of the conversations we have with other people. We have Laura Carreira here today with us. And Laura has just presented her first feature in the official section of the festival 2 days ago, and we're so lucky we were able to share this moment with her. I'm going to speak in Spanish, and she's going to speak in English. So if anybody needs translation, it's now the moment to get your headphones. It's not going to be me who says what this movie is about, but I think there's a lot of things on the table. Am I speaking too fast? Sorry.
Speak really fast, so I'll do it slowly. Que no soy yo la persona que...
I'm not the one who should say what the film is about, but I think it's, it puts on the table certain things that are important and that I think that are not reflected in the cinema world in a way that the spectator is allowed to make their own opinion, things that have to do with the culture of work, how wild capitalism overwhelms people in these town, and I think that that's why this movie is very necessary and very important. And we always start a little bit with the same question, but I'd like to know what the origin of this story starts. Where does this movie start?
Basically, I think when I did my shorts were already looking at our relationship to work and to financial vulnerability. And I think when I finished making them, there was still all these other ideas that I knew I wanted to put into a film at some point. And so I think the feature became that opportunity. And I think when I finished my last short, that film was a lot about, the gig economy, precarious labor. And that led me to start reading about fulfillment centers, with the logistics industry in particular being quite, rife with precarious work. And I stumbled on the job of a picker. That's the job that Aurora does. And it looked quite interesting, this character, who's like 10-hour days by themselves, following by the seconds, the instructions of the scanner that is telling the next item to collect. And I started interviewing and speaking to more and more pickers, and these conversations ended up influencing, the film and the writing, and I ended up finding all these sort of pieces into the script, and then it kind of became that. Another element was that a lot of the people worked in warehouses are in the UK, migrant workers. And obviously myself as a Portuguese person who has moved to Scotland 12 years ago, it sort of made sense for me to write the character as a Portuguese character, because I felt like I could also kind of put in my own experiences of moving to Scotland in those first years, which I think was kind of a very particular feeling, yeah.
Comentabas ahora y mencionabas.
You were mentioning the short, and I wanted to ask you, because that short seems a little bit like a prelude of what this feature film is. And I would like you to tell us a little bit how you saw this experience from going from the short-term feature to the feature. And you're going to tell us a little bit about the movie now. There was you were asked at the press conference, why do you reflect this part of Scotland that is not so reflected, and how important it is to do it? Is it something that's common over them?
Short to feature, I guess it felt natural, I guess, because of all these thoughts that I had left over from the shorts that I was like, I really want to jump. But it was a big difference, like a short, I shot the shift in 3 days, and all of a sudden this one is like 25 days. So it was a big jump. And then I did another thing, which I then kind of realized it was a slight mistake. Now I don't regret it, but for a while I did, which was writing a lot of characters next to Aurora. So I think in the shorts, both of them were just around a single character. And so this meant, it was one actor that I needed to direct at a time. And then when I was writing this feature, because so much of the conversations were about, people not being able to connect with others, but these others are still around, it's like a character that is actually stumbling on a lot of people on a daily basis, but it's still experiencing loneliness. So it felt important to have this feeling that there's a lot of people around her. So in the writing, I was just like, okay, another character, another character, another character. And then when it came to, shooting it and doing a script breakdown, we realized there was about 55 characters to cast. And there I thought I shot myself in the foot. Like, I've never directed as many actors. And I've never even, at the point I realized I hadn't even directed actors that were in dialogue with each other. So I was like, I don't know how I'm going to direct two actors at the same time. So that was really scary. And I just sort of had to do it and hope for the best. And I was really lucky because we found some amazing people to work with, and that was sort of my strategy. It was like, I'm just going to have to find people that are already naturally very good so that I don't have to work and do things I don't know how to do. So that was, I think that transition, that was my probably the biggest challenge. And I think another thing was also, I think the film itself started teaching me a lot of things. I think I went into this journey kind of, scared of making the feature. It's kind of a big mountain to climb. And then more and more I realized, I'm not doing it on my own. I'm doing it with crew and with, amazing, talented HODs who know what they're doing and who are here to support. And I think the moment that I realized the project is, it's a collaboration, I don't have to figure out everything on my own. It was such a relief. It was like, okay, I can do this. We're going to be fine. Yeah. What was the other question? Sorry.
Sí, sobre el proceso como de investigación.
The process, the research on the subject and the particular situation in Scotland, is this something that you have in common? Is it something that happens a lot? What you mean the job? Yes.
To one of the largest fulfillment centers in the UK. So it was kind of, it was relatively fast to find people through friends of friends and relatives and that knew people who worked as pickers. And then, I had a lot of conversations, around the routine. That to me was important. I'd never done this job, so I needed to find out as much as I could about the work, even just the practicalities, So that was really important. And then it was also, I think, just to also hear people's thoughts on the job and, the things they found interesting, what their thoughts were during the day, what they did after work. From that question came the answered laundry, which then made it directly to the film. So there was quite a few things that, that I learned through these conversations that were directly kind of passed on to the film. One thing all of them mentioned, and as a surprising element when they got into the job, was the amount of sexual toys that they picked. So I was like, I'm going to have to put it into the film. It was all these little things that, I just started kind of collecting and, okay, let me find a way of putting that into the script.
Y sobre el guión.
What about the script? Aurora is a person that's always in silence, and it's very oppressive in the film because there's always something that you feel you want her to ask somebody for help or to ask somebody about something. How did you work on the script? Because all this, I understand, is kind of difficult to take there.
Because of the nature of her job, she's by herself. So I knew at work, the conversations that could happen would be in the canteen, and in the staff break, she kind of overhears other people's conversations. But I think a big part is, I guess it had to do with the theme of the film. It's a character that is like you said, wanting to communicate, wanting to reach out, and is really struggling. And that to me also, I think, related to that sense of loneliness, because I think it's a character that wants it so bad, wants to connect with others so much that it sort of makes her stumble while she's trying to do it, So with Joanna, we tried to work a lot on those silences, and on those are the moments where we can see that the conversation isn't flowing and we can see how much this means to her. But I also think another part was almost having that sense that she's experiencing like performance anxiety, you know, that is kind of actually making it even harder for her to connect with people. And that, yeah, I think it felt that was the way to do it. And Joanna gave us like so much material when we were in the edit room, because she just, yeah, her face would like say so much. And I think a lot of these things I only realized when I was in the cutting room and I had time to actually watch the footage again. And me and the editor worked a lot to like play with these moments and place them in a way that would make kind of sense. And, yeah.
¿Y cómo fue luego pasar a la...
And how was it then to go on to the shoot and direction? Because if you make a movie where there's a lot of decisions that are very particular to express a lot of things with images, how was all that process and the way in which you show the characters? Aurora has very particular framing, and her flatmates, others, much more open. I don't know.
So before the shooting, Carl, my DOP, and I, we created a sort of document that were like the principles that we were going to be guided by visually, and I think we were trying to connect them to the theme. So obviously a big one was loneliness, and we were like, you know, I think loneliness has this sort of sensorial feeling to it that I thought we could probably try at least to communicate with the image. And then, you know, there was others. For example, food. We were like, as she's experiencing more and more scarcity, and as food becomes more important, we want the camera to start noticing these things. A little bit like, you know, like it's something for her, it means something. For anyone else, it's just, you know, she's just eating a bar of chocolate, or she's just pouring sugar into a cup. But actually, because we're in the journey with her, we realized that that's a lot more meaningful. And she doesn't ask for help. So actually, those visual cues became the only way to actually kind of let the audience in on what she's going through, because she's hiding it from everyone else. And then there was other decisions, like, because I think Aurora experiences, and I think it's to do with her perspective, this sense of claustrophobia, you know, that her world is smaller. So whenever we had like, we were in real locations, and whenever we like went into a location to film like the kitchen, if there was a wall that was there that we could put her against, we would pick that. And it was almost a way of like getting her to have more walls near her so that she had like less perspective on the world. And we did the same in the fish and chip shop, you know, where she's against the wall and everyone else actually has the shop around them. So those were like little choices that we did. There was more. I mean, the way the camera frames her, we start very much facing her, and then at points that was actually, that happens during the shoot. At some point during the shoot, I started feeling like it was almost too exposing to just film her like from the front. So I started speaking with Carl, and I was like, I think we should start moving the camera to the side, because I think as she's experiencing the struggle to make ends meet and to find food and to like afford her day to day, I think there's like this sort of individual sense of like shame that, you know, that you are to blame for this, and so that felt to me like moving the camera to this side would give her almost a little bit of privacy, or, you know, like hide it a little. So yeah, there was all these little things we kept thinking about.
Y yo siento que en esta película hay algunos personajes.
I feel there are some characters in this movie that are not characters, that are kind of like ghost characters, and one is money. And money is there in the movie a lot. And, you know, you ask for money, you pay, even when somebody buys something for her, they buy in her something, or when she accepts an invitation to go out, to go with them, and she's always thinking about the money. It's always there, very present, and it's not very common. It's not a theme that's talked about like ordinary life, but and I would like you to tell us a little bit the choice of putting it there.
I think it's because, you know, like I see so many films and it's always kind of not explained what the characters do, and they don't seem to struggle for money really, you know. So that to me, it was important to have a character that feels those limitations, because I don't know, I feel like that is more real. Yeah, so that was definitely a choice, and of course it's an issue that she's trying to hide. So I think it was almost like it's important that we know she's hiding it, she's experiencing, but also other people are also experiencing it. You know, it's not just her. It's almost like this is not a problem of this individual. I think this is a bigger problem. Yeah.
Y
And I think that this movie, I feel that social cinema often tries to be either too goody two shoes or to underline a lot of things, or it tells you where you have to feel sad or happy or to go along with a certain character. And I feel like there's like a distance here so that the spectator can, I don't know, think about whatever they want. And with a bit of calm, too, they don't have to kind of like decide at the moment. Things are complex and you can sort of think about afterwards. So I would like you to tell us a little bit about, on the one hand, your references, maybe when it comes to when it came to making this movie and your cinema in general. So what is like your point of view in respect to this?
Like the first drafts of the script were a little different. I think they were more in that direction. And then I think at some point I realized that was really not the direction I wanted to take. And so I started stripping things away. And at that point, I think I kind of scared a little the people I was developing the project with. And there was the fear that maybe the film wasn't going to be dramatic enough now that I had stripped these different aspects. And that was something, to be fair, I didn't know if it was going to work. And I had to sort of, you know, just go, like, trust me, I guess. I have no way of proving it, but, like, let me try it. And then if, you know, if it doesn't work, I'll hold my hands up and go, like, sorry. But that was kind of how I did it. But in terms of references, I mean, of course, you know, like social realism, I think influenced me from kind of young. So those were definitely starting points, or, you know, they opened doors to what films could be, and I found them very inspiring. But more recently, and these were sort of three films that were companions to me in the making of this film. One was Wanda by Barbara Loudon, who's an amazing American filmmaker. And that film just, I don't know, it's, you know, it's not social realist, but it does follow a character. And I think you can see how much this character is struggling to navigate a world that, you know, designed the way that it is. And the other film that I also was like, just completely like, this is amazing, is Il Posto by Ermanno Olmi, which is also beautiful about this character whose life is getting kind of consumed by work. He's like a young man, and it's his, like, one of his first jobs. And also someone told me while I was writing the film for me to watch Nights of Cabiria and by Fellini, and that also ended up sort of, I don't know, it was again this character just kind of fighting different obstacles, very much like a character study. And I think the ending was like something I almost like aspired to, like, if I could ever even make an ending that goes even slightly closer to that, and I would achieve something. Yeah, so these were sort of some of the films that have kind of kept me company.
no sé si alguien tiene...
I don't know if anybody has a question.
No. Perdón, he perdido el... No, hay algo...
There's something when she gets asked the last question at the interview, and this is very recurring when we talk about social life, so about what are you going to do afterwards, and she just doesn't even have time or space to kind of like create her personality. There's something which is very disheartening, because like a privilege seems to be to have a hobby, to have personality, to have things that you like doing. So I would like you to tell us a little bit about the importance of reflecting this in the movie, because I think there's a lot of people that, yeah, you know, like life overwhelms them, that they don't have time to other things.
I guess it's just something that we take for like as normal, you know, to work and to like work your life, your entire life, and that to me is quite strange, and I'm surprised that like it doesn't get questioned more. I think like my generation is starting to look at it slightly different, which is quite nice. But I think it came from that. I think it came from, you know, I don't think the problem is just that, you know, the job is bad and it's badly paid, and, you know, you have no agency over it. Like, those are all big issues. But it's almost like my problem is slightly bigger, is that, you know, you have to work to survive because you have to, you know, pay your bills at the end of the month. And I think the problem is, again, it's not just that the work, it defines your life, is that there is so little time after, you know, to create your own, like, personality almost. Yeah, and I think that was something from a lot of the conversations I had that kind of came up. When I would talk about free time, a lot of people would say, I'm kind of too tired, so I just like get home and like recover to start the next day again. And I could understand that because I think it's like when the work is so physically demanding, that is what happens. And I think that has bigger repercussions, in the way that we live, because if everyone is living that way, then we're really not having time to like care for each other, and we're just too tired to also think of other possibilities and to like recreate our lives. And that to me, there's a lot to gain from potentially trying to move into a world that isn't as defined by work, Yeah.
Bueno, y que creo que también hay espacios en los que también es más complicado, ¿no? O sea, hay espacios.
And there are spaces, there are towns, there are cities where it's more complicated because it seems that all the opportunities, or the places where there are most opportunities, are all linked to having the possibility to be able to do those things. So yes, I understand that those spaces are places where you can have more work, there are more jobs, but if you can't afford it, you kind of like get into a kind of like vicious circle. That's very strange. And it's also that with the mobile, it's also reflected. It's something that she needs to be able to isolate herself and to have like an escape route, but also to be able to work because she'll be called, and it's the way that she is connected to the world. But at the same time, you have to pay for a repair, and her whole economy goes out the window just because of that. So I think that, yeah, it's like sort of like a contradiction, isn't it? Well, it's very painful, actually, and it's very well reflected in the movie.
Then we talked about when I was writing the script, it was like, is she going to be judged for fixing her phone? Because, are people going to point the finger and be like, oh, she could have used that money differently? But it's such an essential kind of tool these days. Even in the job, they kind of talk about how she can only request a day off through the app. And that was something that came from research again. It's like a lot of the managing was done through sort of the phone. So that to me felt like such a strange possibility that people would blame her for the situation she was going through. And I guess I worked really hard to try and also create this sense that like it's very hard to point the finger at what created the situation for Aurora, because it does start, sort of the snowball starts with the dropping of the phone. And that to me was important because I also felt like, you can go online and read a bunch of articles about how the logistics industry is terrible to work for and the working conditions are awful. And that almost felt like easy to kind of portray. And I really wanted to go like somewhere else. And I think the film started, and all the conversations I was having started forcing the film into like a slightly darker place. Because I guess I realized how much of, it's not that it's just tired, it's just it damages you as a person, it damages your mental health, it kind of damages your possibility to make connections with others. There's these entire other, there's all these other consequences that I think, in sometimes in political films it's quite hard to kind of go into that because there is also at the same time so much to criticize. It's kind of it depends, I guess, where your perspective is, and I guess where you think you can contribute towards.
Pero sí que creo que, por ejemplo, la película no la juzga.
I do believe that the movie doesn't judge her. It doesn't judge the character of Aurora at any time, and it doesn't pity her either, because I think you could kind of like feel, sorry for her because the situation is hard, but you kind of like keep the balance really well between both things. I think it's really complicated in a situation like that.
I think it is. I think it came from her hiding the situation, because I think if I went down a more dramatic path of her reaching out for help, asking someone to borrow her money, them saying no, then we would start, it's almost like it's quite easy as a writer to like step on your character. Because, of course it has a dramatic effect. You can just like keep building obstacles to your character and go like, isn't that sad? And I kind of realized the danger that this film could fall into that. And I was very much trying to like constantly pull it away from that. But I think that it was challenging. I think it was mainly more challenging to defend that choice. And to a degree, I couldn't defend it without making the film and then going to see if it worked. Because there was even questions on like, will we know that she's struggling for money? And I thought, I think we will. I think it will be obvious enough through the different details. But again, I have a script. I don't have a film, so it's quite hard to to prove that. Yeah, I think this will work. It's almost like with your first film, it's like you're taking risks because you've not done these things before. So there's also a level of risk that you have to be slightly comfortable with. Yeah.
Voy a saltar un poco de la película.
I'm going to go from the movie towards this that you have mentioned before, that you have to try out. Like we mentioned before, many of the people here are film students, and they have presented a short here. How was this experience for you to make this first feature? And what was the challenges that you had when it came to facing up to this?
It had a lot of challenges, but I think I was really supported by the production company 16 Films that did the film. They produced Ken Loach's films, and they had they were very open to do already certain things that I think quite a lot of production companies wouldn't have, like working with non-actors. That they were completely open to that because they had experiences with that. We used real locations. That wasn't a problem. We got to film almost chronologically, and I thought that was going to be important for Joanna, the main actress, to kind of feel like she's going on this journey. But then I think the main challenges was really, it's a big jump. I think if you might have the shorts and you might kind of think, okay, I've done that and that worked. But then it's such a big, it's a much longer ask to ask someone to watch a film for an hour and a half. And it's almost like what you do with that time. It's kind of hard to understand how the rhythm is going to work once you've filmed and once you're in the edit room. So I think, it was challenging to a degree, but I also was kind of I think this is the moment for me to try something and kind of deal with the risk that it might not work out. And I think so far it was fine. So far most people have understood the things that she's going through, and I think the film is better for that subtlety, because I guess it's that. It's like someone can experience poverty, and it doesn't have to be like a super sad and dramatic thing. It's not that. It's just it's someone who's struggling to make ends meet, and it's wanting to conceal it, and it's dealing with other feelings of shame, and it's, I think, again, is to do with this blame, that a lot of the times when we look at someone who's experiencing it, we question what the person has done, and I find that quite problematic. Instead we should, let's find out how much they're earning for their work, and that to me feels more like a relevant question.
Bueno, y que creo que también es una época en la que
I think it's a question that where there are situations that are very ridiculous, very absurd, like this party that they have, to tell them that they've made a lot of money and a lot of profit, and to highlight that there's been advances in sustainability aspects, and I think it's a bit of a cheat, this sustainability. All companies want to be sustainable, but then they don't want to be sustainable when it comes to the work world, to labor. So it really shows like a moment that's very present, and it's very absurd at the same time.
Especially at that point in the story, I think it's quite hard for Aurora to stomach that information. But I think that that is the reality that we're living in. The companies who are making most profit are making it because workers are getting paid very little. That profit is getting extracted from somewhere. And I also think a lot of these companies are hiding behind where we have the most advanced technology to provide. This is why the parcel arrives to you so fast. And then actually, when you look at it, you realize, no, this is someone who's running around for 10-hour days looking for the next parcel. And I think it's a weird one, because I also think a lot of the people who I spoke to talked about that, about the reward system, for example, being like a chocolate bar. And they felt more insulted almost that chocolate bar was offered. It would almost been better if the chocolate bar wasn't offered. And I think people, it's almost like they understand those inequalities, and they experience that dynamic of power. But because you need the job, you kind of go into a sort of passive way, and you listen to it, and you kind of continue on with your day. And I think that it's kind of quite violent to have that awareness, and to still need to be there and tolerate it. And I think that was something that came out, you know, a lot of people, they were aware of exactly what was happening. They were aware of the amount of money companies were bringing in, and they were aware of how much they were getting paid. And I think it's very hard to live, you know, in a fair society knowing those inequalities. Yeah.
Vale, ostras.
Hello.
Empezamos por aquí.
Hi. Thank you. Hi, Laura. Never journalist from Bulgaria.
Hello.
Thank you very much for the film. It was absolutely beautiful and heartbreaking.
Thank you.
And I wanted to know about one detail that I'm not sure whether I understood well, but if I did, it was brutal. The visit at the warehouse with the little kid that is throwing to Aurora a candy as you throw basically bread to the ducks or something in the zoo. Was it? How did it come to you, this detail? And also I wanted to ask about the actors. Were they, most of them, professional or non-professional? Thank you.
Thank you. So I did a tour of one of the largest warehouses in Scotland, and it was just kind of a strange experience. And I noticed there was also a lot of kids that were there visiting with their parents, and I think they were there to, you know, I think the parents were trying to show them a little bit like you show a recycling center where their like parcels come from. But it was a strange place, and I found it weird that they were doing tours even. And it felt very much like a PR campaign to show you like everything's okay, but then you also didn't speak to anyone who actually worked there. So it was inspired in that experience. And then to do with the actors, it was a mix. So because I knew I wanted to get a lot of different accents, and it was really hard to find professional actors with the accents that lived in the UK. So we did a big open call, and then we started opening it further to people who had never acted before. And we found some amazing people. So I almost think it's maybe 50-50. Like, we have a lot of people who was their first time acting in a film. But yeah, that was really nice. I enjoyed working with them. Yeah.
Hi, thank you.
I don't think we can hear you.
Yes. Thank you for this beautiful film.
Thank you.
Question is also related to the working with the actors. How much of the dialogue was written, and specifically they read it as it is. How much did what's the pre-production period that you set with them? They're sitting in this kitchen, for example, talking. It's like really realistic in a way, like as if in any WG we say in Berlin, shared flat or apartment. I have a second question which is not related. When she's because you talked about so many details which were necessary, were important in the film. There's one when she's going to check how much money she has, and there's a Palestinian flag sticker. Was it on purpose stick there, or?
So yeah, we've put it there.
Thank you.
Thank you for noticing. Yeah, we've put it there. We wanted it to be there. I think, in regards to the actors and the dynamics, I guess, I shared flats, so there was I don't know, I was like, okay, there's something really interesting about these dynamics of like coexisting with a small kitchen. The fact that, and I'm sure this happens elsewhere, but in the UK you have these large tenement buildings that used to be beautiful, and now they've been chopped, and usually the living room has gone already. It's a bedroom, and so it's even that kind of, I think it comes from that same way of thinking, where it's like this, this is a landlord who can make an extra rent out of the living room, so here's a collective space gone. So now everyone is like, fighting for cupboard space, and it's uncomfortable to like live in when you don't have like enough space for everyone to coexist. And then in terms of the dialogues, I think because it was a mix of professional and non-professional actors, I think we did rehearsals, and I think during those rehearsals we started realizing okay, like I'm gonna have to adapt the text because obviously, like I don't know how a Polish person would say something in English. And so, for example, Piotr, who would play Chris, he would come up and he was willing with coming up with suggestions. You'd be like, I think I would maybe say the line more like this, or or if a line wasn't working, we would almost just try and improvise and then grab onto a few things and go, okay, let's take this kind of direction instead. And that happened a lot. Like for example, the conversations that she's listening to in the staff room when they're talking about series and what they're watching, I did write versions of that. So I knew I wanted them to talk about weather and series and work. Those were like the themes I felt kind of come up a lot in conversations, especially when you don't have enough time to actually get to know the person. So it's all kind of very, kind of on the surface. But then there was a lot of non-actors that were doing those scenes, and I realized I think everyone can do that chat without me having to write it. So we literally was just like, you're just gonna talk about those series, and they come up with some amazing stuff, like the American guy who gets lost in his RV in the woods. That was they came up, like it was EJ who came up with that, and then the same for the true crime series. That was also someone going, oh, I'm looking for something to watch. Oh, I've been watching true crime, and we're like, yeah, this is great. Well, so we've ended up using that. But yeah, I think we gained a lot from almost having, because they become kind of active collaborators, and it's great because then it's not just my voice that is writing these dialogues, so everyone sounds a little bit like me. So it was great because then it was like everyone can sound a little bit like themselves, and I think that makes it a bit more real. Yeah.
Which one? Congratulations on the movie.
Thank you.
During all the movie, we have the suicidio, suicidio, sí. Bueno, que está presente el tema de.
Suicide is present there.
The rope, the details on the arm of the lady on the shop, and I think it's very interesting. How do you use it? And it's not, they don't talk about it only at the beginning, and then it's only details. And the scene at the end when she's on the park, I think we all thought that she made it because it's like something that she's scared all the movie, and at the end not. And I wanted to know, I interpreted this scene as she only wanted someone to take care of her or having a hug, because we see her hand on the arm of the sir. So is it like, did you write it like this? Like she's gonna pretend to be on a park, to be in consciousness, and to only maybe to someone if will notice if she's dead or not and have a little bit of warmth, or it has another interpretation? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think you're right there. I think it was about, after the interview, I think she maybe went to the park to rest, and then someone came to tell her the park was shut and that she needed to go. And I think maybe at that point there was that decision to like, I'm just gonna stay here and see what happens. And I thought that was very interesting. And also it's sort of, to me it was, I think it's also bigger. It's kind of showing that I think at the very essence of who we are, we do care for each other. And I just think we live in a way that doesn't create a lot of opportunities to do so. And so I think, we're carrying these different pains and struggles, and there's very little space to, solve them. So that to me was important. And of course, the suicide is like, it's to do with mental health and with, what the ultimate issue might be, that you lose all hope and you decide to kind of, take your own life. And that to me is kind of, it's something that, yeah, I wanted to linger there. Not so much as, of course, there's this, you will see it and you will think, oh, she might do it, because that there is a real risk that could be somewhere where she could go. But for me, it's also about kind of her own perspective, because she's picking all these items, but then she starts noticing the rope, and that almost, yeah, that becomes a sort of a reminder of other people that she's obviously thinking that's what they're using the rope for, is to take their own lives. And that's not, you know, that might not even be the case, but I think in this case it's about a character that it's starting to look at the world with a little more darkness, and that is, it's almost, you know, there's this almost theme of like what's hidden, and these are some of the things that are hidden, and that is quite hard to talk about. And I think it was yeah, this is a character that is almost sort of lifting the veil a bit, and it's all of a sudden starting to find these clues, and it's thinking that that might be what they are. Yeah, it's sort of that.
Hi. Hello.
Hello.
Can you? Okay, there we go. I am curious about the fulfillment center set, because you said you're working with real locations. Were you able to buy out one for the shoot, or because I feel like that they would, yeah, that's antithetical to the way they operate. But like, did you have to completely decorate a space? And if you could talk about that process is interesting to me.
Yeah, so I think from like from research I was doing online on like looking what fulfillment centers looked like, I knew picking would be happening in, you know, these like long shelves. So that was something actually sometimes was hard to convey to crew members, because everyone was imagining, you know, the kind of parcel kind of big warehouse, big spaces, and I was like, no, it's actually really small. It's almost more like a library, and actually pickers called it the library, because it felt so small. And also people thought, for example, the items were all organized, you know, by products, and that was not the case. They were all over the place, and even the tour guide kind of explains the reason why. But yeah, when I started researching, I realized these spaces are so big that actually they look very different, and they have different sections, because, you know, it's a whole operation of products that arrive. They are stowed, so there's someone else who does the reverse job of Aurora, who's someone who has the items, who is putting them on shelves, and then Aurora is the next one who picks it up. But, you know, there's all these different departments. And so I knew that we could get away with finding bits of the warehouse. So that's what we did. And we ended up having something like 5 different places that we almost used sections of it. And then we sort of collaged them. And obviously, hopefully now you don't notice that. And another thing was also scale was quite hard for us to get, you know, to have access to. So we also used VFX and CGI to extend some of the warehouse sections so that we have a bigger scale than we could afford. So that also helped immensely. Yeah. There's someone at the back, I think.
I just had a quick question about like the production process and finding the right production partner and the right funding partner, and especially going from like your first kind of longer film and having a vision of how you want to do it. Like, were there people that were kind of suggesting, oh, you should go in this way? How did you find the right kind of team and funding and production kind of family to make sure you could make it in the way that you wanted to make it?
Yeah, so when I did the shorts, I did my first short, and then I straight away wanted to do the feature, and people were like, no, you need to do another short. And I was like, oh, and then I was like, okay, I can do another short. So I did another short, and then at that point, I really wanted to actually keep working with the producer of the short, but she couldn't do it. So all of a sudden I thought, oh, just as I found like a producer that I really like to work with, she doesn't have the time. So I did that short, and it started getting into festivals. And right at that point, I didn't really have a producer, and I had written a first draft of my film, and of this film. And around that time, a Portuguese production company called Bro, who produced the film as well, approached me, and you know, I'd already talked about them because they kind of had gotten in touch previously because of the short, so we had kind of spoken, and I kind of got them involved in the project. You know, they really liked the script, and they wanted to support me, and we kind of decided, okay, let's try and do this. You know, and obviously this film had a really obvious co-production because it was set in Scotland with a Portuguese main character, with me being Portuguese. So from the start, I think there's going to be a really obvious co-production here. So I should find a Portuguese producer, and then what I was missing was the British side. And so through shorts, I started meeting, like some doors started opening, and I was introduced to some executives at the BBC Films and BFI. Like I was kind of having conversations with them about other films that I might want to do, and they knew I was missing a producer. So they told me I should get in touch with Jack Thomas O'Brien from 16 Films, who became my producer, and they sort of provided the introduction. It's a bit confusing because around the same time I also found him on Twitter and I messaged him, but that was like a day before they introduced me to him. So I don't know who, but it's somewhere there we kind of found each other. And of course he was like very keen in making political films. At that time, I think they knew already maybe that The Old Oak was going to be the last film Ken Loach was going to make. And I think they were keen to try and find new voices and filmmakers that are wanting to continue to tell, socially relevant stories and political films. And they read the first script, and I think, we sort of started talking, and we haven't stopped talking ever since. They were really supportive, and I think then it was almost finding out, how can we put this film together? And I think at that point, I kind of got lucky because my short film was doing well. It was getting into nice festivals, and people were sending me emails, and I was like, okay, I have this feature, like, help me make this. So it was good timing as well. And then I think the funding got together, so we have ICA, so that's the Portuguese, it's the main production funding in Portugal, it's state funding. And we have Screen Scotland, which is, Scotland is where I live, and then we also have BBC Films and BFI. And they sort of came together at different points, At some point, for example, I thought, I have a draft that I really like, and we applied for the very first big application for production money. So I thought, okay, this is maybe where it's going to go well. And because 16 Films liked it, I thought, we're doing well. And then boom, we didn't get it. So then we had to wait another year, reapplied, and then we got the second time. But so we had a few hiccups along the way. And at the time, for example, I think the idea of waiting for a year to reapply again was awful. I was like, what am I going to do with this year? But it made the film a lot better. So I'm quite happy that they didn't give me the money straight away.
Congratulations. I think it was really interesting. My question is about your next movie. I don't know if we could know about the topic.
It's work. Yeah, I still have a lot to say. Sorry, guys. I'm going to make another film, but this time I'm going to move it to the office space because I think there's a lot more absurdity there as well to be found, and I think it's going to be fun. So yeah, I'm currently developing it with Film 4 and with 16 Films. So they're wanting to make the next film, which is nice as well. And yeah, I'm excited. It's kind of a little bit like the way I wrote this one. It's like I'm kind of finding pieces. So at the moment, it's very bitty, I have these scenes, and at some point I'm going to glue them together. But at this point, they're kind of ideas and places and scenes. But yeah, I'm going to try and write it in a similar way that I did with this one because I enjoyed it. So yeah. Thank you.
Y sobre el trabajo, no, sí me interesa un poco.
About work, I'm interested to know about this obsession. Because it really occupies our day so much. And it's what you said before. Sometimes it's almost violent, and there's a lot of dynamics at work that take place. So where does that obsession come from? Tell us.
And I don't know, I was quite a happy, looking forward to the future kind of person. When I got my first job, the future became a lot darker. And I just started looking at everyone around me, and I was like, oh, it's really hard to like see friends now because they're all working and we can't make, our shifts are all over the place and we can't find time to meet. And then I started also looking, also at my parents' lives and realizing how much they had worked. And yeah, I don't know, it just dawned on me like how insane it was. My very first job was in this like cafe in a fancy department store. And they also like, sometimes we had quiet times, and that was one of the first things I was like, this is a bit mental. And they didn't want me to like not do anything because that didn't look good. So they kept telling me to like water the plants, and I had already watered the plants, and I was like, I'm gonna kill them. And they were just like, my manager was like, you have to keep doing it because it's just, you can't just be here stopped. And it just seemed insane. I was like, I was also studying film at the time, so I was like, oh, I could be, reading a book, or I could do other stuff. And they were like, absolutely not. So yeah, it was just all these things, and then maybe because those first experiences of working coincided with a time when I was trying to learn a lot about cinema. I started looking at films, and I was like, oh my god, it's just like we never question what characters do, and they seem to have so much free time and money, and they seem to like it's that typical like road movie film where they just decide to hit the road and they go. And I was thinking of my own life, and I thought, well, I was going to have to ask for annual leave at least with 2 weeks in advance just to go on a road trip, and I might not get it. I might not get the dates that I want. Yeah, it was all these like tiny little things that just made me really frustrated with the way that we live. And I just don't know if we need to work as much, I think we have reached a time where, productivity is so high. I think we can be working less hours. So it's quite interesting to kind of question why we're still working so much, because I don't think we need it anymore with the amount of like innovation that's out there. Maybe it should be used for getting us some more free time.
Estoy de acuerdo.
I agree.
Y ya para acabar y volviendo.
And to finish, and going back to the movie, you were saying that you didn't want to take away hope from the character, but at the same time, you wanted it to be realistic. And I think that that's why at the end, it's a little bit bittersweet, because reality is bittersweet. Things are not necessarily black and white, and I would like to know why you chose to do this.
I really struggled to write the ending of the film. I think we were already going into production, and I was still like, pre-production, and I was still kind of like, oh, I'm not sure if this is the ending that I want. And it was hard because I knew I didn't want the film to be negative, but the reality is, at least for the next week, Aurora was going back to work. That was the reality, and I found that was really depressing. And I was like, I don't want that to be my final note. And then, I wrote different endings. I was unhappy with all of them. I was getting quite frustrated with like my inability to write an ending that I liked. And around that time, quite a lot of the pickers that I sort of stayed in touch, that were every now and then I would speak to ask them more questions, or if any other thing came up during the writing that I wanted to find out more about. And they all, within a week, started kind of approaching me and saying, oh, something happened that I think you'd find funny. And it was that they were experiencing these like outages, and when they arrived to work, they couldn't actually do their jobs because there had been an outage, and so they were all playing games and like killing time waiting for the system to go back online so that they could work. And the managers were playing with them, and they were saying they were listening to music. They were like, some were like doing karaoke, and they were like, it was the most like humanizing day. And there was something really little as well that they said, that it was the first day where I found out like the names of some of my colleagues, which is something so small, and you realize just how much they don't really know each other. And I thought, okay, I think this is maybe the ending I've been looking for, because it's something temporary, but it's just something that offers a little glimpse of like what could be. And if we did stop working, the possibilities of play and of another life. And it is bittersweet. We know that after they're going to go back to work, but it's nice to remind ourselves that possibility is still there. Yeah.
bueno, pues nos agarramos a esa.
Well, we'll hold on to that possibility then. Thank you very much.